countryside there. Okay. So here we are then for this conversation with the wonderful Jonelle. And I was just thinking about some of the things I love about you, Jonelle, and they include your humor and playfulness. I love I don't know how many of the rest of you see these, but Jonelle, if you're connected on social media, you do these wonderful neighborhood treasure photos from your local area, which always kind of just give me a smile and a chuckle. I love your wisdom and your humility. You seem to have cracked this, like, I've never heard you be righteous, which I really, yes,
it's a work in progress.
Big work in progress for me. I wanted to just start with a quote, if that's all right. And some of you know it, I think, already. It's by Andrew Harvey. But I think it speaks to something about the conversation that we're going to have, because it's about worldly matters and the spiritual kind of combined. Anyway, he says this: a spirituality that is only private and self-absorbed, one devoid of any political or social consciousness, does little to halt the suicidal juggernaut of history. On the other hand, an activism that is not purified by spiritual and psychological awareness or rooted in divine truth, wisdom, and compassion will only perpetuate the problem it's trying to solve, however righteous its intentions. When, however, the deepest and most grounded spiritual vision is married to a practical and pragmatic drive to transform, then we have a holy force, he calls it. The power of wisdom and love in action is born. I define this as sacred activism.
Wow, beautiful.
Yeah, I really like that. Yeah, so let me start with just, and the rest of you do ask questions as we go along, but how are you making sense, Jonelle? Because we've not really caught up one-on-one for ages.
Yeah.
How are you making sense of the way we seem to be headed as a world and society? And you know, of course, it's, as you know, from, if you've read any of my stuff, it's not just about heating or climate change. It's a whole range of interconnected predicaments that we're facing, which seem to be coming all at the same time. Yeah, so what sense do you make of that? Like, yeah.
Yeah, I don't make sense of it in a way.
Right.
I do see everything connected the way that you're talking about. I begin to see it more and more, that the problem with someone in the homeless shelter, and I work a bit with the homeless, and the climate problem and the money market problem and the consumerism problem, and I can see it all connected now. You know, you can see that we're living in at a deeply fundamental way, a very insecure society. I think someone, maybe one of your speakers was talking about where the world as a teenager needs to grow up, you know. And so everything about our systems, whether we can see it or not, is there's so much fear and lack and insecurity. And we've built systems to avoid feeling that or experiencing that, not realizing that, you know, it's a figment of our imagination.
Yeah.
So I don't, but I guess I do see the connection.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I think that's really been true for me over the last few years. It's kind of, I started out just waking up to the whole climate thing, and then, you know, as you say, kind of,
yeah, everything.
And yeah, it's all one interconnected thing, which I've said this before, but I think all comes from, or its source deep down is disconnection. with ourselves, our deeper nature, each other, and nature, of course.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Really beautiful.
So, so yeah, well, let's get into it then. So you clearly, from what I know of you anyway, you find ways of navigating all of this, and you seem to do that from a real position of, or from a come from that's about love and resilience and well-being and compassion and clarity. Like, can you just speak a bit about that? Like how
that happens?
How does that happen? How are you able
Yeah.
to do that when there are so many people freaking out at the moment?
Yeah. I can tell you the story I've made up about why that happens.
Yeah.
but I also know that there's much more to it than my ideas and my words reduce it to. So I'll do the best that I can. So I had an experience about 7 years ago, it's probably about 9 years ago, where I had some sort of spiritual experience where I just saw that there was much more to the world than I thought there was, and that I'd ever realized before. I saw love in a way that was impersonal and unconditional, that was much greater than any personal love that I hold or have held for anyone in my entire life. So I knew that what I was really feeling most of the time wasn't love, it was attachment and need, and it was personal, and this other thing was impersonal. And I knew that was truth, and all this other stuff was the game I'm playing as a human being, And that insight came with all sorts of things. Like, I realized the illusory nature of my thinking. I saw that unconditional, impersonal experience of love for everything and everyone, no matter what it was God, was universal consciousness, whatever it was. That's what all the wise have been speaking to, all these years. And so it just gave me something that I never had before. And it let me see all the craziness of my past, how I had been completely making up a story of my life that was causing all my suffering. And I saw something bigger than I did before. So because of that, just that, which was big for me.
That small thing.
That's all. That's just a small little thing. But I kind of came back to living as Jonelle in this life. And since then, I've been learning to negotiate with some awareness of negotiate my life or navigate my life with some awareness of that's the truth. And everything else is what I call my personal crazy, you know? And so it hasn't been easy for me. And I think, I know I've had a few people talk about my humility, and the only reason why I have any humility is because I keep being brought down to my knees, that despite that insight that was so powerful and that I wanted to get back to, and I just wanted to live there because, oh my God. But I keep being brought back to my knees, and I see how powerful my thinking is, I'll give you a little story. Just last week, I have diverticulosis, and I shouldn't even say that because, when you say something, then you're stuck with it, right? So I occasionally will have these bouts of uncomfortable abdominal pain. And it's been going on for about 15 years now, and I've been trying to figure out what it is, and I've been diagnosed with things and been trying to change my diet and my lifestyle, but it's slowly been getting worse. So last week I had one of the worst bouts I'd ever had, and it didn't just go away in a day or two. It lasted 3 or 4 days. And in the middle of all that pain and suffering that I was feeling, I thought, that's it. I can't take this anymore. I really wanted off this planet. Suicide was an option for me when I was in the middle of it. And And suicide is not, and the funny thing is suicide is a viable option for me because of that experience. It was like I call it a near life experience instead of a near death experience. So I have no fear of death. You know, I have a strong sense, for me, I know what it is. And I see it as incredibly beautiful, and because it is falling into that space of the unconditional and impersonal. An experience of love we can't even imagine. So yay, I'm happy to go there, you know. So, but I don't want to deal with all the messy stuff of actually killing myself, you know. I wouldn't want to go through all the pain, you know. But it constantly humbles me. Like, I know the truth. I know the truth. And yet I experience great suffering all the time, you know. I will get caught up in the whole what's going to happen to the planet. And, imagine all these horrific stories in my mind of what are going to happen to people and what are happening to people right now, you know, and the suffering that they're experiencing. And so it just kind of keeps me humble. Like, I remember when I had that insight, there was something in me that knew that it was profound, and I could feel my ego wanting to be special because I had had that insight. Yeah, and I remember when we went to Super Coach, and I knew this understanding, and I couldn't understand why everyone around couldn't see, because I'd see them have really good insights, but then they just weren't. They go right back into their thinking again. And I so wanted to be the person up on the stage telling everybody, oh, this is how it is. But I felt the ego in that, you know, like, and so it was like something in me knew enough to just shut up, Jonelle, you know, like just, and that it was my ego that needed that acknowledgement that I've had this great insight, and that I'm special because of it, or whatever it is I do. So I just get that. The humility thing is just because I get constantly humbled all the time, and I'm aware of it, which is so powerful.
Yeah. And we talked about a little bit, you mentioned their suffering, and I loved your post, I think it was earlier today on social media, about the 3 kinds of suffering. And if you want to share that with us, please do. But it's kind of like, do you see suffering as, because there are many spiritual paths or psychological paths that kind of say, no, you know, suffering is a part of the whole experience, of course, and others say, no, you know, once you have a deep enough insight, you won't suffer anymore. Just speak a bit about that, if you would.
Yeah, I sure wish that was true, that if you have a deep enough insight, you won't suffer anymore. And it could possibly be true. And I have tried to get there. I have, you know, I had that insight. I know that that's truth. And I know that if I were to be able to live there, I could experience anything, extreme pain, extreme suffering, and have nothing on it, because I had that. I had a feeling of that. But it's not since then what the world has gifted me, or the universe has gifted me. It doesn't want me to live there. It wants me to live here as Jonelle in my personal crazy. And so, yeah, I've lost the question now.
No, it's fine. It was just really whether, you know, because with the, I'll just talk about the climate and ecological emergency. You know, Joanna Macy, for example, talks about grief, and I mean, we could debate whether grief is the same as suffering or different, but you know, she talks about the fact that that's the price we pay for loving. You know, when we think of all this that might be lost or is being lost, that, you know, there would actually be something really quite disturbingly wrong with you if you didn't have any kind of grieving.
And I would say that that could be true, and it might not be true.
Yeah.
You know, like I have gone down that road before. And then I've kind of pulled myself back and go, oh, that's another me trying to desperately make sense of the world so that I can find a way to navigate it. So I've got something to hold on to.
Right.
And even that thing about suffering that I talked about, or that I'd wrote about, I loved Pema Chodron's description of the 3 types of suffering, and I'm aware that I have a different perspective of suffering. But I don't want to hold on to my perspective of suffering, and I don't want to hold on to her perspective of suffering. I just want to get out of it what I can in the moment and just hold it as lightly as I can. And so that helps me navigate, because the more I think I have a clearer idea of what is truth, or what suffering is, or what this whole ecological crisis is, the more I think I know what it is, the more I become rigid and limited and less able to beautifully navigate it in a more graceful way. And I make myself suffer when I do that.
Yeah. Brilliant. I've been speaking and talking and reflecting a lot recently about maplessness, you know, that this is in fact, the whole deep adaptation, in many ways, it's kind of been an invitation. It's not an invitation into, here we go, this way, folks. You know, it's actually an invitation into maplessness about everything.
And isn't that freaking amazing? Like when you tap into that, like holy, like, you know, one of the things I was thinking about was, I love the speakers that you have on and that are in the community, you know, Schmachtenberger. And people like Charles Eisenstein or Zach Bush, or these people who have these brilliantly beautiful minds that can take a universe that is so incredibly complex, incomprehensibly complex, and they can pull things out and they can turn it into this beautiful thing that I can comprehend, you know, and that I can go, oh, that's right, you know. And then that when I go, oh, that's right, that makes me feel better. But then I remember, oh, they've taken something that is incomprehensible and complex, and they've reduced it to something that's not what it is. You know? And the reducing is helpful because it may give you an idea, but it's not the truth.
But it's not the thing. No.
It's not the thing. And although I love that stuff, if I dig into that stuff and I want to hang on to it because it's so beautiful what they've done, and I want to follow, you know, make up all my rules of what I'm going to do or how I'm going to do it because of something that they were able to put into a beautiful form, I'm looking in the wrong direction, you know?
Yeah.
I get closed again. And then I bump into of course, you know, I bump into reality. and
also people who are saying the exact opposite. Who's saying the exact opposite as well, you know? Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, love that. So I've got one more question, but I kind of want to maybe I'll sort of tail this conversation with that one. But over to the rest of you guys, what are you curious about? What would you just like to riff about with Jonelle? Because she, you know, she has the right answer. Of course, I'm kidding. Yeah, over to you. What feels like it would be useful to share?
Well, I have a question for you, actually, if you don't mind. You know, I was one of the things that is kind of stuck in my mind, but I don't feel that I've experienced in the same way or dealt with in the same way, but you have your own experience of when this whole ecological crisis came. You kind of cried for like 10 days, and then you eventually got over it, and you felt that was part of your ability to kind of, you came out on the other side of something, and from there you've created like a whole new direction. And I haven't had that type of an experience, and I'm curious about that, whatever you can share. I almost feel like I should have that type of an experience about this, but then I know that that's me going my crazy again, right? Yeah, but I want to know more about it.
Yeah. Well, briefly, I don't even know to this day what stimulated, that just starting to wake up to that. I can remember the day and the date, and then, as often happens with the interweb, once you start, you kind of, one thing leads to another, and it was just like,
yeah, you started seeing things that you didn't see before.
Yeah. And then so there was this most profound grief of my life. And by the way, I have, it's not that I've come through that. You only go through it once, and then you're fine.
Yeah, see, now that's the story that's the story I kind of had in my mind, eh?
Right.
Yeah, but you don't.
No, it's kind of much more, there are days where I feel divinely nudged about what to do next, and I've learned to trust that and follow it. And like just this morning, I was, this didn't come from me, there's kind of a brand new workshop that I'm starting to put together that links lots of different things about this. So I started to trust those more and more, but it was this, I have learned, I always considered myself a learning monster, my whole life, but the last few years, I think I've learned more about, about all sorts of weird things that just never were on my radar before, like economics, like politics in a huge way, like the rise and fall of civilizations, which I knew nothing about, too. And indigenous wisdom and everything, and it's all just kind of,
it's all starting to come together, isn't it?
Woven, yeah. It's like weaving a rug, and the rug is the whole world. But certainly in my resilient moments, I do feel I wouldn't exchange that profound grief for anything. There was so many gifts in there in terms of discovering this even deeper wellspring of love and courage. Actually, courage to give less of a shit about what people think of me, and do I look foolish, and am I weird, and all of that, and just deeper with that, and I think it's kind of, I don't know anything much for certain, but I'm pretty sure that you can't get to that, for me anyway. I don't think I could have gotten to where I am now without going through that dark night of the soul.
Yeah. I was thinking, I haven't had like the one that for the global horrific path that we're on right now, but I did have it before then. So maybe that was my, I had dealt with depression all my life, and or I thought I dealt with depression all my life, and I just came to a culmination where I just couldn't take it anymore. And that's when I had my spiritual insight. That's when I had that insight 9 years ago. But while you were talking about that, there was something that came to mind that I want to share that has been really helpful for me in negotiating all of this. Now that I think about it, is that it was something I heard Charles Eisenstein say a while ago. And it's got to do with this view of this interconnected tapestry that we're all living in that we can't comprehend. And there's all these threads going all over the place, and we're all butterflies creating tsunamis, you know, like there's just this incomprehensible nature to life. And because we can't understand it, we want to understand it. So then we can know what to do.
Yeah.
And then when we do something, we want to see the results of it, you know, as if, you know, as if that particular result is what proves that what we're doing is right, because we can't be sure. And of course, all that's, you know, craziness. But one of the things that he said that stood out to me, and it's kind of part of my, it's my ongoing raison d'etre, or my ongoing, kind of what I keep falling back into, is I cannot know the complexity of the universe, but I do know the truth of love.
Yeah.
And I do know the energy of that and the feeling of that. And even in a practical sense, it's the type of world I want to live in. And all I can do, knowing that everything, including me, is absolutely incomprehensible, the only truth I want to live in is love. And that love can come in infinite number of forms.
Yes.
So I don't have to be Charles Eisenstein or Zach Bush or Daniel Schmachtenberger and come up with these beautiful responses for how to manage the world. I can take little pictures of my neighborhood and post them on Facebook.
Yes, and work with the homeless.
I can cook a meal, make extra, and bring it to Rick's mom. I can open a door for someone. I can, in the moment of being with the homeless person for just a moment, look into their eyes and almost cry because what I see is so beautiful, you know? That's it. And so that's the only thing that I know that is true and that has an immediate feeling to it for me. And from there, I am not responsible for what happens with any of those. So then the little threads of joy go out into this incomprehensible universe, and they all join together. And it's like the ripples, it's like the butterfly's wings. And I'm not responsible for that. And I don't want to hang on to it because my ego does want to hang on to it. I want everyone to like all the pictures I post on Facebook, you know, oh, look, how many hits did I get today? Who read it? Why aren't they reading it? Oh, look, that one caught on. Why did that one catch? Like, you can go crazy with that stuff, but it doesn't feel good. I can feel it's tight and constricting.
Yes.
And it's not truth. It's my ego playing the game of life, you know? And so I don't have to worry about the climate crisis. I don't have to go on, I don't have to hold my banner, you know, and march up to I don't, unless in the moment, it seems like a really fun idea, you know? I just can do all the things that somehow I feel lean me toward the truth of life, which is this unconditional, impersonal love. So that's how I navigate it. And I fall back into this feeling of constriction and worry and anger and righteousness and fear, a great fear. Oh, I have so many fears. And but I know the difference between them and that other thing that's true. And so that's what I do. And because of that, I have a lot less, there's another part to this too. I'm pointing to things that appear to be loving and beautiful and nice. So some people will take that as a prescription. Oh, well, I just need to do the things that I like to do and make me feel good. Okay.
That's not what I hear you saying.
And that's not it either, because I was at the homeless shelter one day, and I ran into this woman who I I just fell in love with. And she's a woman who's Indigenous and had abuse and terrible things happen her whole life. She got into prostitution and drugs, and she's in and out of her drug addiction. And but she's like a warrior, like a freaking warrior. And the reason why I fell in love with her was one of the stories that she told me. And she said she's probably in her 50s right now. And one day, or over a very short period, two people were trying to get a hold of her at the same time that hadn't seen her for 30 years. And so the one person gets a hold of her via Facebook or something, and she can't really figure out who it is, and then realizes, and so she contacts them, and they said, I've been trying to get a hold of you. And she said, well, why? And he said, I've been trying to get a hold of you because I want to thank you. And she said, you want to thank me? And he said, yeah, well, when I was your social care worker 30 years ago, you were the most difficult, horrific person I'd ever had to deal with. And he said, you were so difficult that I realized I wasn't cut out to be a social care worker. You know, you allowed me to see that this was not the thing that I should be doing. And so he ended up going on to become a lawyer and a huge land developer that's really famous in our community, well known. Now, whether to say that's actually a good thing that he ended up doing, I don't know. But he had a profound insight from the worst of her behaviors. Okay, he wasn't cut out to be a social care worker. So the other guy who's trying to reach her around the same time, he says, I've been trying to reach you because I want to thank you. And he says, I want to thank you. And she goes, well, what for? And he says, I want to thank you because you were so horrific to deal with when I was your social care worker 30 years ago, that I realized that if I could handle you, I could handle anybody. And he went on to an entire career in addiction. And he opened up centers in Vancouver, and now he's working in, he does addictions with gambling. And she's kind of pissed off at him for that because she wanted him to continue working with kids because he was so good at working with kids. But that story comes back to me all the time, in that it's another thing. I assume that it's only the good things that create a ripple of good in the world.
Right, yeah.
And then I remember that story. And first of all, it kind of gave me a relief because I feel like I'm terrible at sharing the 3 principles, and I've had no luck at coaching it. And it just hasn't worked out for me to be a 3P coach. And I feel so much shame and embarrassment for that. And it just gave me I can be really fucked up and be okay. You know, my fucked upness could actually be good for other people, you know? And yeah, so yeah, like that's another part of this. We can't possibly know what is going on in this universe. And the only thing that makes this experience, this incomprehensible experience of life bad, is when we reduce it to anything.
Yeah.
Anything.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I mean, even just at the pragmatic level of time, if such thing exists, like we never know, we never know what the time scale is either, right? So it could be 50 years, it could be 5,000 years, it could be, you know, yeah, lovely. Right, come on, the rest of you, get in there.
I've got so much in my mind, it's not very, it's like, oh. Wow. And I, you know, there was something about maplessness and And this whole, I mean, and Kimberley, you telling your story, because I remember so clearly sitting in the 3P conference in that huge room the day after you'd watched an Extinction Rebellion website. And for me, the whole thing around climate and environmental sustainability, as it was before, going back 10, 15 years, and the 3 principles, and how do they connect? How do they connect? How do they connect? And I was constantly asking this question to everybody, every time I was on a thing, it's like, how does this link with this? Michael Neal, tell me this. How does this work? And I couldn't get there. And I know it could be that moment in that thing where you're like, oh, this is like, there's something here. And so, but it still feels very mapless. And
Yes.
the whole thing about, need to do something, need to take action, need to do something, and think about having a personal impact. How do you know if what you do has an impact, and what is an impact anyway? And what does it matter?
Yeah.
So there's all of that sort of stuff going around. And I guess it's just really interesting to hear your reflections and that, when I don't do this, or, and it's okay. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've had recently is, over the last 12 months or so in lockdown, I haven't done anything active, as in, XR. I haven't been involved with that for a while, and that was the thing that I was involved with to a very small extent. And I thought I haven't done anything because I don't feel the need, the urge to do it somehow, and that also sort of feels okay. So yeah, I have nothing to ask or comment. It's just like, it is how it is, and I think for me, I'm doing, in my working life now, I'm doing more around human rights and social impact and environmental. And therefore it's almost like, well, when I've done with that, then what do I do when I'm not working? And do I need to do something? Or is, so I'm here today because I was like, oh, I haven't connected with people, in this way for such a long time. And it's just like, it's really lovely to hear what you're saying, but also we don't know and we don't need to know, and that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, it drives me crazy, but I know,
Yes.
but I know it's truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's that thing about, I remember that conversation, Sian. Thank you for reminding. But I think it was what Jonelle was saying about being able to discern. Like, I know if I look at my flip chart just opposite me in my office here, I've just come up with this strategy.
I love it that you still got a flip chart. Have you got scented markers?
I have got scented markers, of course.
Oh, scented markers, the trainer's dream.
Absolutely. But a strategy for this local community group that I am doing with some people in Hertfordshire. But I know, as at the same time that I'm drawing these pretty pictures, it kind of it feels good, it feels right, it feels good to be able to have something to say to people about that, because otherwise it's like, well, what's your group all about then? Don't know. That's yeah. But at the same time as creating this, I know it's made up. I know it's completely kind of just a construction, a useful construction for now. But I think it's that thing about being flexible and fluid with it all. Yeah. Thank you, Sian. Who else?
It's very human, isn't it? Wanting to know, wanting to be, like you said, wanting some certainty, but it's so much. What I like about the discussion is being comfortable with not knowing. It's like and hearing other people talking about being comfortable with not knowing. Yeah, I think that I've been getting much more comfortable with not knowing just recently, because I'm like you said, I'm like, but I want to know what I want to know. You can't, you can't. And that's just like human beings wanting to experience enlightenment. You're not going to. I mean, the spiritual experience that you had is lovely, but it's not. We are enlightenment. I mean, that's who we are, right? So we don't need to do that, but the human being wants to experience it. And like you said, I've heard several people who've had that experience talk about it was such a distraction because they want to go back there. They want to go back there.
Yes.
Like you said, want to go back.
Yeah.
And so they're now searching for that rather than experiencing this. And experience, not knowing is interesting.
You know what stands out to me for that, as you were saying that, was that we do live in an acceptance of not knowing all the time, but we don't see it. Yeah. It's just for certain things. So, I was thinking about all that lovely gardening that you do and how complicated it is, and how you must know in your working with it, how every time you're constantly learning something new and you think you know something, and then when you plant, well, why didn't that one grow? Or why did that one go? I thought it was going to be, I've got the right soil, I've got the right, it's this plant next to this plant. And you don't have anything on it. You just have this joy of gardening and you think it's really cool. So you're walking around 100% and not knowing all sorts of stuff, and you're watching it appear, and then you're doing something beautiful with it. You don't have anything on it. But when it comes to climate change, or it comes to something else, then you're stuck in it. So all of us have all sorts of stuff that we're doing all the time, where we're living and not knowing and being perfectly okay with it,
Yeah. That's brilliant.
But it's just these other talks that kind of thought, oh, I do that all the time. I live in not knowing all the time, but it's just, yeah.
And then when we think we need to know so that we know what we should be doing, like you said, and it's not, and there's nothing we should be doing. It's different for all of us, and following. Just following.
Yeah, and also that there's a fun, there's like a joy in not knowing, because like every time you discover something new, because that plant wasn't growing, oh my God, I figured it out, like there's a joy in, there's a joy in not knowing it. And holy shit, well, if there's a joy in not knowing that, what is there other stuff that, like if I reflect on it, what other stuff is there out there that I don't think there's a joy in not knowing, but there could be, Yeah.
That just reminded me too of the thing about suffering, because I don't know if you've heard me say before, but about 3-4 years ago, I broke my shoulder skiing, and it was but I didn't know I'd broken my shoulder, right? So it was the first day of skiing, and we'd come down a black run, and that was fine. And then we were just on the flat, and I tripped over something I didn't even see what it was. And I was in a pile on the floor, and my shoulder really hurt, but it didn't occur to me that it was broken, right? So it really, 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 really hurt. But I wasn't suffering. It was really strange. I was I was in tears, in pain, but and I fell on it again, because I fell on the way down. I carried on down, and I fell over again and fell on it again, and it really, really hurt. And I sat in the snow for 5 minutes crying, and then I picked myself up and got down the rest of the hill, and then I sat in a bar while my partner went off to fetch the vehicle to collect me. And I sat with an Irish couple, and we were chatting. They got me a drink, and we were chatting, and every now and then it would go into spasm, and I'd go, oh, pull a face or something.
Yeah.
And they'd say, are you all right? Do you want us to go and get, and they were really worried. And I'm like, no, I'm fine. It was really, really, really hurting. But it was so strange. When I look back on it, it was so strange, because looking back, it's like I was not suffering. So I went back to our apartment, went to bed, slept on it all night. I took some painkillers, but got up in the morning and it was still painful. And I thought, I need to go to the doctor and find out what I can and can't do. It was only when I went to the doctor's and he took an x-ray. And well, first of all, he looked at it and said, I think it's dislocated. I'm like, no, it's not dislocated. And he said, well, what do you think that lump is sticking out the front? Oh my God. I still didn't believe it. And he did the X-ray, and he came back with the X-ray, and he put it on the board, and he said, "Bad news. Look at that." And there was like a break right through here, and it was dislodged completely like that.
Wow.
And I was like, "Oh my God!" And I never suffered through that. I never suffered through the operation. I never suffered through any of it. And then I spent the rest of the week having a lovely time. After I was only in hospital for one day, and I enjoyed the rest of my holiday. And I'm not like that all the time about pain or suffering.
Yeah, me too.
So it's like, I don't understand. I don't know what happened there either. It was just really weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think those are just nudges from the universe.
Yeah, that's how I see
and
it.
then when you become aware of those, then you realize that there are multiple ways to experience life, and it's a reminder. It's like that story of the woman and the two men are trying to reach her to thank her after 30 years. To me, there isn't truth in that as much as there is a nudge to me to see something bigger than I'm seeing now. Yeah. I had a fell down some stairs a couple of years ago, and I just sprained my ankle really badly. But when I fell down to the bottom of the stairs, I heard crunch really loud. And I was just lying on my back on the ground, and my feet were in front of me. My face is kind of looking up at the ceiling. And I don't know if I felt pain right away. I can't remember. I did eventually. But I remember thinking, oh, crunch. That's bad. And I thought, I have to get up, but I don't want to look at my ankle because I don't want to see it dangling off the end of my foot because it'll be so horrific to look at, and I'll just pass out or something. But it wasn't in a scary, it was kind of like, I don't want to look at my ankle because it's going to make me, Now, eventually I had to look and, get up and do whatever. But it was a kind of an experience like that, Anne, where it was, I'm sure it was great pain in the moment, but it was something funny that came up in my mind. I don't want to look at that thing because it seemed funny to me seeing a thing dangling off, and I don't want to look at it. And that was just, again, another nudge. Now I went full crazy onto that thing after, having to go to the hospital. I hate going to hospitals, and what it was going to mean. And, I went full on crazy after that. I was really scared, and I was going to have to face all sorts of fears that I try to avoid most of the time. And, but you get through it. And, but yeah, that first little thing with the humor that came up, oh, that's a nudge,
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Anne. Thank you, Jonelle. So just got a few minutes left. Anybody else? Ashley, Erica?
So, unusually for me, as you know,
Yes.
I'm a bit wowed by the whole conversation. But there's one, I've got there's one sort of really, my mum, who in my story of my mum is the least tuned into intuition person on the planet. You could see her get intuition and then watch her ignore it every time. Do you know what I mean? You can literally see it and then you can see her go, no, I'm not doing that.
Oh, that's hilarious. That is hilarious.
It's amazing. And she walked into the consultant's office telling the consultant that all she had was a sprain and sooner or later it would go away. And my sister, who was with her, was looking at the x-ray that was on the wall, which was of my mum's hip. My sister was thinking to herself, I'm not a consultant, right? But I don't think a hip looks like that. And the consultant said to my mum, Mrs. Blackmore, that's all very well and good, but I've got to tell you, you actually no longer have a hip. It's completely disintegrated. There's no hip in there whatsoever. So having walked in, she needed a wheelchair out.
Oh, Jesus.
Astonishing.
So having walked in, she needed a wheelchair out, and then spent. They managed to bump her right up all the lists because of the severity of it. But she then spent about 6 weeks doing absolutely nothing because she was in such severe pain because she, you know, I don't know, whatever. But it was just interesting. It sounded so. I'm not even sure what point I'm telling, other than it's such an odd story. Listening to you two talk, what you're talking about. And then just that story of my mum, who by sheer belligerent whatever it was, you know, I haven't, there's not a problem. And then the universe went, whoa, look at that. And she was like, oh my God.
Thank you.
But other than that, absolutely brilliant. I've loved every second of it. And questions have come up and gone so rapidly.
Yeah. Well, my last question, I'm not going to ask it now because you've kind of resolved it already, really, which was it was going to be something earnest, like what's our responsibility as a leader or a coach or a
that's a good question. I like that one.
Or a warrior for the human spirit, you know, at this time. What's our responsibility? But you've done it, really. So yeah, well, let's just go round as we say, or just before we say au revoir, and maybe just share the thing that the idea or the thought or the insight or something or the feeling that you'll take away from this. Sian, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that comes to mind has all the way through is, and as somebody said this as a 3 principles person somewhere, that pain was inevitable, but suffering was optional. And that just seems to be a theme that's come through with the different stories and relating to the climate, you know, crisis as well. So yeah, that's what's with me.
Brilliant. Thank you. Anne, how about you?
What's coming to me now? The only thing that I didn't mention then was about the going through the despair part of it. I'm the same as Jonelle. I haven't gone through that as such, and I think it's just, I don't know whether it's just because it's all come to me over a longer time and come to me gradually. It didn't like hit me.
I think
wham.
me too.
I think that's maybe why.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, but and it's not because I can't see it's happening. I can definitely see it's happening, and it's, you know, but yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Anne. Ashley.
Tongue in cheek, halfway through, I wrote down that I feel wholly inadequate through not having had a big and deep enough enlightening experience.
Yeah, just go away and study more, Ashley.
Yeah.
Yes, study.
But actually, this has been a brilliantly enlightening experience. I've loved every second of it, and I had no idea what to expect, but I feel real joy at that. This has been brilliant. That's where I'm at. There you go.
Thanks, Ashley. Erica.
Yeah, sorry, I had my hand up a couple of times to ask questions.
Oh,
but,
I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. But I mean, yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that has comes out of this. I mean, there was something that, you know, Jonelle said about, you know, this having this understanding means you don't have to worry about the climate crisis. I mean, what I would say is that whatever you feel moved to act and however you feel moved to act from that place of peace and clarity is yours to do. So for some people, it's growing vegetables. For other people, it's making cakes for the neighbors. For somebody else, it might be setting up a new global movement.
Yes.
You know, it's not, there's a risk in people hearing it as saying that you ought not to care because it's not your job. And I would say, not quite. And coming back to your question about responsibility, you know, I think it's our responsibility to get out of our own way and do whatever crops up.
Yes.
And talking about maplessness, you've got no bloody clue what that might be. You know, because people are, when we did the walk from Plymouth to Carbis Bay, 87 miles, to the G7 meeting. You know, somebody asked me, you know, what did you achieve? I just about managed not to burst out laughing because they asked the question in all seriousness. So I wanted to be polite, at least. But yeah, I mean, you know, because the honest answer was, of course, we've got no bloody clue. And so what anyway? But in the real sense of, you know, we met, of course, lots of people along the way. We had lots of experiences ourselves. There would have been enormous ripples. I'm absolutely confident. We got a lot of media coverage, etc., etc., etc. We'll never know.
Yeah.
But it felt like the right thing for me to do and for a few other people to do. Yeah. So we did it.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of middle, beginning, and end of it for me.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. No, I love that.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I was struck by just coming back to this making love the compass rather than any kind of outcome. And I know that, but it was just so good to remind myself of that. And it's fine to, you know, it's absolutely, if I'm feeling grief, feel it. If I'm feeling joy, feel it. You know, there's nothing right or wrong about any of these things. Brilliant. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Everybody,
Thank you.
unmute yourself. Thank you so much, Janelle. I knew this.
Oh my God, I had a blast.
Yeah, me
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Me too. Yeah, and we mustn't leave it so long next time. And thank you, everybody,
Yes,
for coming.
please.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and
Lovely to see you all.
lots of love.
Lovely
Enjoy.
to meet everybody I haven't met yet. Good to see you again.
Bye.
Anne.
Cheers,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Love to
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.